You are now listening to Playbook Radio. Here is your host, Martin Williams.
Welcome to Playbook Radio. My name is Martin Williams. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. We do so on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. All links to the podcast can be found at gameplanplaybook.com. That's gameplanplaybook.com. So today what I wanted to talk to you about is how weekends are for planning, but weekdays are for execution. Most people work a 9-to-5 job, and if you have any sort of life outside of your job, there are other things that you want to be doing on the weekends, and I totally get that. And the weekends should be used not only for planning, but also for relaxation, reconnection with family and friends. Definitely take a nap. That's the big highlight of the weekend for me, is to be able to get at least one nap in during the weekend, because usually doesn't happen during the week. But one thing that you want to, at least from my perspective, make happen on the weekend is to plan. And the reason that you want to use your weekends for planning is because it helps you execute more during the week. Okay. Too many times, especially the busier you get, the more things you got going on, it's very easy to get bogged down and kind of get stuck on one thing. And so what happens is that you put a lot of energy into one or two things, but what if you have 20 things to do? The likelihood is that those other 20 things aren't going to get done, and you're just going to feel like, you didn't accomplish anything for the week. So as a rule, I like to plan during the weekends. Typically on Sunday, sometimes Saturday is better if I got a lot of things planned on Sunday, but you want to use the weekend to plan. Now, what are you planning? Primarily, you want to plan your work, right? So you want to plan the things that you have to do in your 9-to-5 job. If there's things that didn't get done this past week that you got to finish this upcoming week, then plan those things out, right? Because what gets planned gets done, right? That's something that you've heard, certainly more than once. And it's true. A lot of times what happens is that people try to keep everything in their head. They try to keep a running list of things. And I used to do that. And that was one of the worst habits I had, especially as my life got more complicated, a lot more busier with a child, with a spouse, with, family responsibilities, with a busier job, with the side business that I'm working on getting off the ground. The more things you got going on, the less things you need to be keeping in your head, because that's a great way to burn out. That's a great way to basically say, you know what, I'm not going to do anything. And then everything just kind of falls apart because you don't have the energy to execute the way that you need to execute at the level you need to execute and the amount of things that you need to execute. So the planning part becomes crucial. Now, how do you plan? I can attach a template of what I use, but basically I use AI to write out my core plan, right? And so basically this is a starting plan that I work on and will use as my starting point for the week. So everything's planned out. Everything that I need to do for my work, for my business, for my health, workouts, diet, if there's things that I need to do for my family, which there always is, then those things will go on there too. Any type of medication I need to take, any vitamin supplementation I need to take. And then, also any fun that I want to have. If I want to go somewhere and do something fun, then that goes into the game plan as well. My spiritual practice goes into the game plan. How much I want to pray, how much I want to read. All these things get planned out because at the end of the day, if it's not on paper, it didn't happen, right? That's something that I've learned in being in clinical research for over 15 years, the FDA has strict rules about documentation. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. And what happens a lot of times is that people don't document what it is that they want to do because they're used to keeping things in their head. They're used to, living out of their head or living in their head, however you want to put it. And what ends up happening is that things drop, things fall apart because your mind is for creativity. Okay. It's not meant to be a storage compartment. It's not meant to be a hard drive. Your mind, your conscious mind is meant primarily for creativity, right? You want to devise, I should say, plans and strategies with your conscious mind, and you can only do that if it's free to do that. If your mind is being used as a storage, as a hard drive, you're not going to be very creative. And most people working today, they're not as creative as they could be because they're living out of their head. And again, easy to do, easy to get into the habit, but we got to come out of the habit. So the starting point for me would be, if I'm planning my work week out, I'm taking all the things that I didn't get to the previous week. So if I had a very busy week and I didn't get to a lot of different things, then I'm taking those things and I'm putting them into the new week's game plan because they have to get done, right? Then I add in the things that I know I have to do this coming week, right? These are things that are long-standing items, like weekly tasks, things that get done every week no matter what. Things that I know that are coming up, all that goes into the game plan too. Then I figure out how many meetings I have for the next week. So if I have, let's say that I have 6 meetings, right? And those 6 meetings are going to take up 6 hours. Then I have to add in at least another hour or two for the agenda preparation, minutes preparation, and so on. So probably about 8 hours. So I only have about 32 hours to get done everything that I need to get done for this coming week, right? Or else I'm working overtime. There may be times when I have to do that and it's unavoidable, but as a rule, you don't want to do overtime each and every week because that's a fast track to burnout. And a lot of people are there now because they're working 40 to 50 hours a week because they're not managing their time properly. Okay. Once you do that, once you figure out how many hours you have to actually work, then you've got to guard your time like they guard the gold at Fort Knox. You have to be ruthless with your time. The default answer to unscheduled meetings, unscheduled calls should be no. Should ask people to basically set a meeting up, right? And then, don't be too quick to set up a meeting. If it can be handled with an email, then handle it with an email. And then sometimes also especially for you people that work remotely, you have to let people know that just because I work remotely doesn't mean that I don't work, right? I still have to work. In a lot of cases, if you're working remotely, you're expected to do more because you're not commuting, right? So that job is giving you a heavier workload in return for the freedom to work from anywhere. So you have to be protective of your time. You have to protect your time, not only from coworkers, but also sometimes from people around you, right? And understand that if you do that and you do that successfully, then when you're off of work, you can, you can be more present for family and for friends because you're not working overtime so much and you're not working weekends so much. But if you don't protect your time, if you're not ruthless about your time, then you're going to have to work overtime. And that's not anything anybody wants to do long term. Okay. So you figure out how much time that I have to actually do work and then divide that up into 30-minute compartments. Okay. So if I have 32 hours, I think I said, yeah, I said 8 hours for meetings because 6 are for meetings and then 2 more hours are for meeting preparation. then I only have 32 hours to do work. Okay. So if I divide that time up in 30-minute compartments, that means I can complete 64 things, right? If I give every task a 30-minute window, I have 64 things that I have to complete. Now that sounds like a lot, and maybe it is a lot. And maybe if you do that, you'll realize how much time you've wasted in the past. And to a degree that happened to me. I realized that I was wasting a lot of time, but also, if you have a lot of things to do, you realize that the 64, that the 32 hours rather isn't enough time to do everything. So now you've got to be ruthless with your priorities. And maybe there's things you need to delegate. Maybe there's things you need to, offshoot to someone else, right? But all these things you should be working out in your plan over the weekend, because when you start work on Monday, you want to hit the ground running. And if you have to adjust, just like a coach in a game has to adjust, and you do that, right? If you have to adjust your time frame, because there's always going to be unscheduled things that you can't avoid, that you can't turn down, and maybe your manager is pulling you into something and you can't avoid that, right? So that's fine, okay? That's going to happen. But as a rule, you want to be able to predict as much of the next week as possible. And then you do this for every other part of your life. And if you do that, what you will find is that you will get more done than the average person almost automatically. You will probably be the most productive person that you know. You will be, if you continue to do it and you do it long term and do it consistently, you will be not only the most productive, you'll probably be the most successful person that you know. You'll be the most orderly person that you know, the most organized person that you know, because everything's on paper and you're not trying to figure everything out in your head. Okay. And that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to avoid you living out of your head on a week by week basis, because you have a lot to manage. If you're the head of a household, if you're a parent, if you're an employer, if you're a manager at work and you have people under you, people that are waiting for you to provide leadership to them, you cannot be in your head. You have to be able to be organized, and you've got to be orderly to the point that you can have a coherent strategy on a day-to-day basis. And this is the best way that I've discovered to accomplish that. So I have a template here that I'm going to attach to this podcast. If you're on YouTube, you can click that link. If you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify, you'll be able to click that link as well and try it out. It's a prompt that will take you to, you'll be able to use in a Chat GPT or a Claude or Gemini to create an itinerary, to create a plan. And then from that point on, you just basically work from that plan. And what you'll find, again, is that you will be more productive than if you just did everything out of your head. So thank you so much for listening. My name is Martin Williams. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to Playbook Radio. If this episode helped you, please share it with family and friends. For more about Playbook strategies, please go to GameplanPlaybook.com.